All right. So I want to talk about the sun and where it is in your chart and why that is super important. Okay. So first of all, your sun sign is basically your signature energy, or it is the path in which you're going to go about life. So even if you don't really resonate with your sun sign, you're still going to have the experiences of that sign. Those elements of that sign are going to be dominant or important in your life, whether you resonate with your sign or not. Okay. But what's important is that's the what, right? What's the core energy, right? You're sun in Libra. We have something dealing with partnership and you're relating to other people and partnership within relationships, business, friendship, socialization. Those things are going to be important to you, even if you don't feel like a Libra, right? If you're a sun in Gemini, information is going to be really important to you. Communicating with other people, all those different things that are very Mercury based are going to be important, even if you don't feel like a Gemini, right? But where that sun is going to show you how it's going to represent itself, though, right? Because you could be a sun in Gemini, but if you're sun in Gemini in the eighth house, that's going to make a big difference than in comparison to someone who has a sun in the third house. So your sun placement is very important because it's going to tell you how is that energy going to play out. The houses are kind of like neighborhoods, right? So you can have, if you think about it like analogy like that, you can live anywhere you want to live, but the neighborhood is going to give you a different experience. So look at your sun placement as the neighborhood. It's going to give you a different experience, right? And so the first one I want to talk about is going to be, I'm kind of not going in order, but I do want people to understand the importance of knowing your sun placement or the placement of someone that you're involved with, or your child or friends, family, anybody that you want to have a better understanding of that person's core energy or where they're going to shine the most. The sun is where you're going to shine the most. It is where you can see, you have the most potential to be seen in this area of your life. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the sun in the third house. So the sun in the third house person. So third house is ruled by Mercury, and it's the part of Mercury that deals with learning. So as we know, Mercury rules Virgo and Gemini, and Mercury does slightly different things in those signs. When we talk about the third house, we're talking about the areas of knowledge, early childhood, short-term travel, siblings, neighbors, things that are close together that we can learn from, right? Especially when we think about the third house being one of the earliest houses, right? We think of Gemini energy, there's Gemini energy in the third house being one of the earlier signs. And so if your sun is in the third house, you're probably someone that likes to communicate a lot. You're probably very talkative. So, even if you're not one of the very talkative or typically outgoing signs, you're someone who has a lot to say. And so that could come across in different ways. It can mean that you're someone who's just very extroverted and you always have to say your opinion, and you always have to share what you know. It's a little bit different than the ninth house. The ninth house type of person would go more into theories and conspiracies or want to talk more about the purpose of life. Whereas the third house person could, depending on what else is in there, especially if you have like something like, if you ever had someone who has like their sun and their Mercury in the third house, this person could kind of come across sometimes as a know-it-all, right? Now, wherever the sun is where you're going to shine. So this is probably a person who also could have done very well in their early childhood, right? In school, they were naturally curious, okay? So they were naturally curious about what they can learn. Now, as they got older, it's very possible the sun and third house person started to question things a little bit more, because remember, you can't really contain the third house all that much. So even though it deals with more the objective and it deals more with, excuse me, the objective mind, not the subjective, it deals more with facts. It's also one that has to kind of feel around. It's curious. It has to know what else is going on. And so sometimes you can find these people who are so smart, but later in life or later in their education experience, they kind of can suffer from not having good grades. Or this could be a person like this. It's a person's sun in third house. You're like, wow, they're so smart. They learned so much. They scored perfect on their tests. Why are they not in college, or why did they not pursue anything academic? But sometimes it's because they're so curious that they want to go wherever the path may take them. And sometimes it's not always the straight line. And because it's hard sometimes for that energy to stay focused in the third house, it is an air house. So air dealing with movement. So because of that, you can have a person who's very talkative, very smart, intelligent, curious, but sometimes it's hard for them to stay focused on what it is they actually want to do. So they might have all this knowledge and be the go-to person. They're not going to be shy about this knowledge. They could go about it in very different ways. Your sun and Leo person is going to be very open with what they know, because Leo is the sun. It shines. It is not shy energy. Leo is is a performer. But then if you had a sun and Virgo person in the third house, well, they're more analytical. So the way they communicate, they're going to talk a lot about what they think about how something works, right? So it's not so much a performance type of thing like a Leo. It's not even like your Sagittarius. For Sagittarius, is very firm about their opinion. It's a mutable sign, but Sagittarius also typically has very, even when they have unorthodox beliefs, Sagittarius tends to stick to what they believe. Like the biggest things that are most important to Sagittarius, they tend to just really make sure that, like, that's always something that of them. Like you might meet a Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a vegan, they're type of person. They're like, I don't eat meat or whatever. Like they are going to talk about why they don't do it if their sun is in the third house, the belief system behind it. You see what I'm saying? So where you see the difference? Now, Sun in Gemini might just tell you, right? Just Sun and Gemini person might just tell you. Sun in third house Gemini might just tell you, I don't eat meat. This is why I'm a vegan. This is, but obviously you could be vegetarian too. I'm not saying like if you don't eat meat, you could be vegan or vegetarian, obviously. But I'm just using this as an example, right? Whereas your Sun in Sagittarius, third house person, is going to look at it and tell you why and almost try to convince you that you should be a vegan or vegetarian as well. And just tell you, like, I saw this documentary and this is what they did to the animals and you should watch it. And I don't understand why you're doing this because, like, sometimes Sagittariuses can, some of them, be a little preachy about what they believe and why you should believe it too and why their view is the best view. But again, a lot of Sagittarius, they don't mean to do it in a I'm going to take over your life way. Sagittarius has a very broad understanding of the world. And Gemini is a little bit more objective, right? It's a little bit more like, communal and keeping things to the literal level is what the Gemini third house type of energy is like. So I gave that example just for you to understand that there's going to be key characteristics of someone with the sun in the third house. But when we look at their signs, or when you get your birth chart interpreted, that's when you're going to see how this actually plays out. You're actually going to see, like, what does that mean? What does that look like, right? For a person with sun in Pisces in the third house versus someone with sun in Libra in the third house, because it's going to look different. But in general, your third house person is someone who values communication. They're probably someone who is very good at getting back to you, very good at getting back to people. They value it. If your sun is in the third house, you don't want to be known as someone who doesn't return calls or doesn't return texts or someone who doesn't, give the information. Sun in third house people love to be the givers of information. And so sometimes they just know random things. Sometimes they just have this understanding of things. Like, they're the person, and sometimes you might not know their chart. So you might even, have these people in your life and not realize it's because their sun is in the third house, where you're like, this is the person that if you were ever on Jeopardy or something, or whatever game shows are out these days, when they would let you call somebody to give you the answer, this is the person you would think of. They probably sun in the third house, because the third house collects information. And then once we get up to the ninth house, its opposite sign is when we start to do more purposeful things with the information. But the point of the third house is they have it all. The ninth house, they don't necessarily have all. They kind of focus on these very important ideologies that they want to drive. You see what I'm saying? So, like, it is super important to understand opposite houses. I'm not talking about that right now in opposite signs because they influence each other. Your sun and third house person is typically going to be someone who has quite a few friends, because the third house is linked to neighbors, neighborhood, siblings. So the sun and third house person probably had a close relationship with siblings growing up. There's other placements that can indicate that too, but it can be different. Their role was they had to be maybe the kind of caregiver, because the sun is where you're going to shine. If we're talking about third house, early life, now once you get to be an adult, The third house can sometimes take on a different meaning where it is more about communication. It could be about how you use your communicative skills in your profession. It could be more about your friendships, or how you know, your ability to keep in connection with your friendships. It could be about how you're learning, right? The sun and third house person is a lifetime learner. You know, there's other placements in the third house that can indicate that as well. I believe Saturn, because Saturn is about this long-term type of thing, right? Saturn's a long-term type of energy. There are Pluto. Some people that have Pluto, Saturn, Sun, you probably are a life learner. Like, you're always trying to learn more. You might be a person that goes back to school if you're, you know, into higher learning. You know, you already went to college, you go get your master's, you go get your doctorate, you know, you're traveling to learn more. You're always trying to get more knowledge and get more information. Now, third house people can also be prone to gossiping or knowing a lot of information about other people, because you're seen as somebody who always likes to talk. And since you always like to talk or you have the information, I mean, and it does depend on the sign. I will say this, like, there might be some signs that don't get caught up in these situations as much. Whereas your air sign people, your mutables, y'all, you know, especially mutables like, you know, Gemini and Sagittarius, y'all are opposite signs. So, some of the stuff's just gonna go together. Like, you guys have to be really, you know, aware of the tendency for any type of gossiping or situations, because people are going to come to you as a source of information. And sometimes that means, like, people might get you involved in something you weren't even supposed to be involved in, but now you know the information and now you're stuck on, now you're involved in it, right? But because third house, like communication and sun in third house, like, it's always going to rule your life. You are always going to need to be connected to people. Are you a person that can go into the remote woods for a long period of time by yourself? Probably not. Maybe you can. You know, and again, I always say these things, like, if you're someone like, this is me, this isn't me, this sounds kind of like me, what's going on? You know, I definitely recommend that you get a birth chart reading, because it you know, especially the way I do them, I incorporate all the energies, right? I don't just talk about your sun sign or your moon. I talk about how all these energies in your chart interact. What does it mean for you? What are some tendencies and possibilities? All right, so that is it for third house sun person. Please visit the other videos where I go through the sun in the other houses and see how that would impact your personality and how you exert your, you know, your overall signature energy to the world.